If you've been shopping around for an entry-level blast cabinet or even just a bucket blasting option, you've probably seen this gun. Some manufacturers that have it with their cabinets list the air requirements as being 7 CFM. Now you may have asked yourself, why doesn't Blast It All have a 7 CFM gun? Well, that's because this gun is not 7 CFM. To understand why, we have to understand a little bit about the suction blast gun. Most people think the nozzle determines the CFM of the gun, but it actually doesn't. The nozzle size determines the amount of suction that the gun has, and when paired properly, the maximum amount of media is pulled up the tube and is forced out the nozzle so that you can blast. So what determines the CFM? It's actually something called the jet, and more specifically, the orifice of the jet. The orifice limits the amount of air that can travel through the gun per minute. We measure that in cubic feet per minute. To give you an idea, this box is 1 cubic foot. So to get 7 CFM, we would be cramming 7 of these through the orifice per minute. On this gun, just like all guns, the orifice is located just behind the nozzle. It looks pretty small, but you can cram a lot of air through that tiny hole. So how did they get 7 CFM? It took me a while to figure that out because this orifice is actually larger than our 12 and 21 CFM guns. Then I found this site which has a really great CFM calculator. If you plug in the orifice size of the 7 CFM, you get a discharge rate of 7.155 CFM. So they were right. Well, not really, because they're missing some really important information. There's a field here that is called PSIG, upstream gauge pressure. This is the pressure that you set your machine at. The default is 12. No one is blasting with a suction gun at 12 PSI. For most of my testing, I've been pretty happy with results at 70 PSI. Put that number in there and you get a more accurate CFM for the gun. Yeah, 22.699. That is a lot more than 7. But taking someone else's word has never been my strong suit. So I wanted to test this in the real world. Here's how I did it. I used this 21-gallon, 175 PSI, 1.5 horsepower, 4 CFM compressor. I connected the 7 CFM blast gun, set the gauge to 80 PSI. It looks like 85, but that's because of the angle. Made sure the tank was all the way full and then turned off the compressor. Then I started recording and held the trigger down long enough to have a full minute of decompression. Using the video, I noted the starting PSI and the final PSI for the minute of discharge. Then it was time for some math. I calculated the cubic feet of the air in the tank at the beginning and the cubic feet of the air in the tank at the end. Then I subtracted the end from the beginning. This gives you 18.14 cubic feet of air. And since it was discharged over the course of a minute, that would be a real world CFM of 18.14. This matches up pretty well with the industry standard chart that blast cabinet manufacturers follow. In fact, on that same webpage, you'll find that chart. The 7 CFM gun has an orifice that's just a little over 1/8 of an inch, probably because it was done to a metric standard. But if you look at the 1/8 inch diameter orifice at 80 PSI, you see 21.4, which is pretty close to our real world number. If you want to try it out for yourself, find a 7 CFM compressor, set it to 80 PSI, and let me know how it works. I tried blasting with 4 CFM compressor, which decompressed for about 26 seconds before the compressor kicked in. I was able to blast for a little over a minute and a half and still get pretty good results. After that, it was pretty ineffective. So if you want a gun that is going to let you blast a little longer than your 7 CFM gun, you can order our 12 CFM gun, which is charted at 12 CFM, and in a real world test, came out at 11.45 CFM at 80 PSI. Or you can buy a 25 CFM compressor to run the 7 CFM gun. My suggestion would be to buy good quality products from Blast It All. If you like what you've heard or have experience with this gun yourself, let us know in the comments. If you want to know more about abrasive blasting, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos.